Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Jack Ryan, Season 3, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode. Let's break it down. So first and foremost, let's start off on the Czech Republic side of things. That was interesting. Obviously, Greer and President Kovac have history, so she is going to be a lot more willing to listen to him, despite Radek's trying to dissuade her to. But part of me was almost like, it almost seemed, well, we won't know you want her to kind of go on a more like letting NATO put the missiles in the Czech Republic, because that allows Russia to do what it's doing, right? But I guess it's like, right, you can't seem too eager, so you have to be the one that seems like you're against it. I guess maybe you don't know what the CIA knows, so you don't know if they're going to try and convince her not to do that. But maybe you also know, like, well, it's in the CIA's, kind of the US's best interest if she kind of leans to more towards accepting the NATO situation. So maybe that's, once again, it's hard to say what role he's kind of playing, because it's like Greer is such an X factor, so she is willing to listen to him, and Greer kind of lays it all out because Wright told him, like, hey, like, you don't have to fully fool her, get her on board with the NATO thing, but you kind of have to nudge her in the right direction. So it's like, right, she appreciates Greer has always been a bit of a straight shooter. He'll tell her the truth. So it's like, okay, so we don't believe this particular guy that you think, what's his name, Kessel or whatever, we don't think he's actually a shooter. We think Russia's actually the one that pulled the trigger on this, because this is more so their style. There was even, was it last episode or episode 1 where they made the joke of like, yeah, this definitely wasn't the Americans. The Americans go more so the bomb route, as where, and it's like Russians kind of go more the like making a point with a gunshot route. But he tells her, like, right, we kept an eye on, we had Dmitry, the Russian, now deceased Russian Minister of Defense, like, oh, we had him like bugged, so we know he might have presented himself as a hard like liner, like, oh, he was very against, like, you know, being very civil with you about this, but truth be told is he was 100% on board with you because he didn't want to go down the nuclear route. But there's a lot of right-wing people on his side that he had to kind of appease, so it's kind of that thing, very much like if you've seen Alice in Borderland, there's a certain character who had to play the role just to appease other bad people. We'll kind of leave it at that, if you know what I mean. Hopefully, I kept it vague enough that if you're familiar, you get what I'm saying. But he kind of had to play a similar role in that regard. So, but also, like, Russia has invaded Ukraine, and apparently they go, what was it, the Slovakian border, I think is what he said. But obviously for her, it's like, wait, why am I just hearing about this? And that's the thing. The U.S. has been sitting on this information. They're only telling you now because it's pertinent in the grand scheme of things. We're only telling you this information now because it's also beneficial for us. Well, Greer's like, right, I'm telling you how it is. I'm not going to tell you what to do because you're a strong enough willed person. I know you're going to go down the route you are. All I'm going to do is present you with the information. You choose what you're ultimately going to do with it. So, but it is that, like, that political game, and even just like that world stage game of like, yeah, we know some stuff, but we're not going to just offer that information to you. We're going to hold on to it till it's pertinent. It's like, now the situation calls for us to tell you what's what. But it's like, yeah, kind of blindsiding her like that. And obviously Greer kind of getting put in that position. He didn't like that, but it's kind of, it is what it is. Now, what's interesting on the Czech Republic side of things is we find out that the president's father is neck deep in all this. And he said a really interesting line where he's like, she's Russian, whether she knows it or not. So I was like, oh, so does, like, I don't know how that whole, like, whole thing breaks down. Does he believe, like just, like, mentality and at her heart, she's Russian? Or you mean, like, legitimately she is Russian and she just doesn't know it? Like, I don't know whether he means that in a more philosophical, or does he mean that in a literal sense, that she's Russian and she just doesn't know it? So he's kind of working with, obviously, Alexei, as well as some other people who are kind of backers in this plan. And one of the guys is kind of running his mouth off about, like, okay, first and foremost is that, well, we got this CIA officer, Jack, we have to deal with. At first, when they reference, I was like, is that in reference to Jim? But it's like, no, I think it's the Jack, because, well, he's out there with information. And once again, they don't know how much Yuri might have told him. So there's that. But he also brings up President Kovac, saying, like, hey, your daughter, like, you don't have as much control of her, as much sway as you claim to, might be in need for like a, new person to kind of step in. The moment he said that, and the way he was looking at him was like, no. He's valued enough that, what he does to support us, he is entitled to his opinion. You could tell that look. I was like, oh, you're going hunting? I'm like, okay, you're going to kill him while you go hunting. It ultimately does. But I was like, I was reading, I thought he was going to do it sooner than he did. But it's like, no, we have to at least keep up the pretense of like it being a hunting accident or something. I don't even know if we're going that far, because shot him, left him for the wolves to pick apart his body or something like that. So it also made sure it was nighttime to, I guess, sell the story better maybe. But it's like, yeah, because I think his name's Peter, President Kovac's father. He says, like, right, he brings up like Dmitry, the former President of Defense, Minister of Defense for Russia. Dmitry and them shared very similar ideologies, except across certain points. He feels like they've kind of lost their way as Russia. Like, yes, we all love Mother Russia, but some of us are willing to go further than necessary, because this is all about resurrecting the Soviet Union. So it's like not everyone can get on board, and it makes sense why Dmitry doesn't, because we learned when Jack is looking stuff up about Dmitry, he's someone that in the past who will always try to avoid going the nuclear route because of the large scale ramifications of like, we don't need to go that drastic. So he's always been someone that was against that. Hence why he had to be removed from the board, because he's one of the biggest like opponents to like going the more nuclear route, and all of this kind of relies on going the nuclear route. So. And he was kind of talking to Alexei about that, and talking about like, he basically was saying they kind of lost pride in what they were. Because he's like, hey, my father, I never saw him cry until the wall went down, because for him that kind of signified it was finally over, and what they were as Russians was kind of lost. And he kind of looks to the guy that was running his mouth off about his daughter. It's like, he's like, yeah, you have arrogant pricks like him. And like, this is no time for arrogance like that to be around. Hence why it's kind of like, yeah, use it as an excuse, but it's because he brought your daughter's name up. It's like, don't ever like mention my daughter in that breath, like, oh, like she needs to be killed. It's like, nah, like he doesn't appreciate that. But it's also, you're too much of an arrogant prick to keep around. I'm sure that came secondary to the fact is he mentioned your daughter. So along those same lines, we do have Jim investigating the stadium situation. So he's looking through video. Obviously the shooter was never caught on camera. It's like, all right. And then he just happens to look at before Dmitry got shot. He sees that Radek ended up leaving, and he's like, what's up with that? So he brings Radek and the president there to the stadium, and he has her try to remember what happened, because he kind of needed her to come to the conclusion herself, because it's one, like, having her come there first, it's like, right, it's a little, because even have her be like, huh, that's weird, because she remembers thinking, it's like, right, before the shot went off, like, Radek wasn't nearby. It's like, he left before the shot. It's like, that's weird. That's like my head security guy. Why would you leave? And that's what Jim had noticed. And it's like, right, he's suggesting that this whole situation had to be an inside job, because it's like, none of it lines up, because they can't necessarily 100% trace the money back to the source, but it's like nothing makes sense about this particular guy being the shooter. And on the surveillance footage, it shows that he didn't show up in that car alone. Now, they couldn't identify Radek's like wife, because of probably like just they don't have probably like someone else would have to run through that video, kind of enhance to get a clearer picture of her. Like, she probably avoided any other security cameras when she was leaving. Well, because we know they got in a vehicle and left, so I don't know if there's going to be any opportunity to really know it's her. But, they are onto Radek now, so the question is, what are they going to do about that? Which ultimately the president did make her decision, and she did go down the more NATO route, which is exactly what they wanted her to do. So it all worked out in the end. Like, it's like you're kind of playing right into this this cabal or whatever, like you're kind of falling like right into their hands. And interesting enough, because who's she going to confide into? Her father, because her father is her most trusted ally. So, and he's going to swing her, be like, right, you know what you must do, whatever decision you make, daughter, you have to, and she's like, yeah, I've already made it. So it's like, yeah, it all works out. Everything plays out. Radek might have been found out, but it's kind of irrelevant, because everything's going down the way they need it to. And you could tell Greer was kind of a little like, I wish she hadn't told her father, but it's also like, I can't say anything. So I was like, yeah, I'll confirm yes, I do believe Radek is behind this. So I mean, it probably won't be long before he ends up getting popped, him and his wife, most likely, because it's like, yo, you've been found out, and we can't take the chance that you're going to get caught or like interrogated. So yeah, him and his family are definitely going to die. Once again, it's for the greater cause. I'm sure is how they'll justify it. So. Oh, while this is going down, Wright is having to deal with an FBI situation because Miller sent in the FBI to kind of start like looking for Jack because they've escalated it to treason, which is like, whoa, why is this going? He's like, yo, the dude in charge of it, Harris, is like, that's above my pay grade. I'm just doing what I'm being ordered to do. So Wright is trying to stay a step ahead, trying to find Jack, which she does find him. He tried to get in contact with Zoya, which I love that Mike was following her, and I was like, she's going to catch on to him, but it's like, oh, I guess not. But then she's like, yeah, I clocked your guy a couple miles away, like a couple blocks back, so he's kind of rusty. It's like, I guess Mike's kind of been out of the game. But once again, I'm not clear on like what time frame this is. Like, has it been a couple... I mean, he probably really being out in the field in that capacity. Because even in season 2, he wasn't in that. Like, he was more so like a behind the desk person. So obviously he got out in the field and stuff last season, but not in a very like sneaky capacity. It ended up kind of turning into a firefight capacity, obviously last season. So, but also implying like, once again, that was season 2 was 2019. So it might actually be 2 or 3 years later. So it might be 2022 or it might be like 2023, depending, so. But Zoya is not willing to give up. Well, she's willing to help out because of this whole Sokol thing. It's like, right, this is pretty bad, and nobody wants it to come to this, so everyone's doing everything they can help, even she is, so. And I thought was pretty, Jack has Mike on his side because he's kind of keeping Greer away from all of this, the fallout of all this, and he's making his choice. He's thinking about it. He's like, he doesn't want to get Mike or Greer mixed up in it, but Mike is like, nah, I got your back during this. He just wants him to think this through because, like, once you cross a certain line, there is no going back. Like, right or wrong in this situation, you're still, like, even if you come out right on the side of this, which you are right, it's going to blow up in your face, and there's going to be certain things you won't be able to undo now that you've gone this far off the deep end, which is where he is at the end of the episode. But either way, I love the whole situation of them being on the train and switching the numbers around. I was wondering if Wright was going to catch on to that pretty quickly, being like, yeah, there's something to this. Because Greer kept being like, oh yeah, last episode being like, yeah, Jack is pretty meticulous. And later on, when the train passes by, she turned around and walked away. And Harris was like, what are you doing? She's like, the train he was on was red. I was like, oh, I didn't even pay attention to that train. I didn't even pay attention to the detail because we already knew he was on a different train. Like, that was the whole point of, like, that hacker dude, like, changing the number and, like, the destination of, like, the train and stuff. Like, of course, that was to cover that. They'd go tracking the wrong train, but I didn't even pay attention to something like as simple as it's a different color. We don't even have to wait on the train. It's like, no, Jack's not up there. He's on a red train. That's a blue train. So I was like, oh, that was neat. And I love that she just walked away, just kind of like, oh, okay, I see how this is. It ain't going to be the easy thing that you think it is. Even without Greer 100% backing him, he does have Mike's help and Mike's connection. So he's not completely alone. Granted, it's a whole other beast when you don't have any CIA capacity or anything to turn to in this regard. You kind of are on your own in some cases. So. But they're on the train in the first place because it's like, right, this is where they need to go to meet the person that set all this in motion. And Jack ends up on the train, and him and Mike get attacked by Constantine. And then there's also Luca, which I'm like, oh, we know Luca's the inside source, but he drugged Jack. I was like, oh, I mean, I guess you have to play along. And then, like, he's asking all this questions, like, okay, who's the inside source? And Jack's like, I don't know. And the moment he pulled out a gun, I'm like, go ahead and point it towards Constantine. I know you're going to, and he does and kills him. And it's like, well, let's kind of talk this out. And it's like, okay, so, because Jack already knows who he is. Luca's reputation precedes him. It's like, oh, I know exactly who you are. Even later on when he tells Wright, it's like, oh, Luca's the source. And she's like, I literally cannot go to Miller about this, regardless of you being right. Luca being a source, we thought was bad enough. Zoya, it's like, no, Luca we know, you've heard what he's done. You know what he's done. It's like, yeah, but this is much bigger because he's saying, like, right, it isn't Russia, it's Russians doing this, because it's kind of what I thought. It's like a subgroup, once again, that's trying to revive the old ways. They feel like, probably like, oh, Russia's kind of going soft, because there was even that line from Peter, President Kovac's father, saying, what was it, that they were the monster in the night that every other country was afraid of at one point in time. Like, it's like Russia wasn't nothing to fuck with type of situation. Like, you want that smoke, we'll bring it, you know? We'll give you all the smoke type. It's kind of what Russia was about, and they probably feel like, oh, Russia's kind of gone soft. We've kind of lost a little bit of that grit, that fight we had, and we're trying to restore Russia, Mother Russia, to what it was, so... But yeah, it's like a cabal group, you know, and obviously Alexi's kind of at the head of it, because it's like, yeah, even kind of discussing that with Mike, Jack was like, yeah, there's a good chance he did it. And like, bump off your predecessor, who was super against going the nuclear route. It kind of made things easier for you when you end up ascending to the job. But Luca's like, oh yeah, I don't really know. He's like, oh, Soko, he's like, yeah, it was a terrible accident. No, nothing else beyond that, which I'm like, we as the audience know that's complete and utter horseshit, because you definitely do know, you were there. We know you were there. I wonder what other stuff has he done? Like, is that just it? Because when they say like, oh, he's done some horrible stuff, like, are they referencing that, or are they referencing something else? Like some other stuff he's done in his career that has kind of garnished him the reputation that even Jack's like, yeah, I know who you are and what you've done, so. But it's like, yeah, Luca doesn't know who he can 100% trust, even amongst his own government, considering, like, well, he knows Alexi's in deep in all of this, so he has no idea who else is, so he's kind of handling this on his own. He's like, yeah, I kind of pushed the U.S. in this situation to kind of get them to act, and he's like, yeah, Zoya was kind of his asset, and he's like, yeah, she trusted you, so that's why I kind of set this in motion, why I chose specifically to put this all kind of towards you. But it's kind of like yeah, the enemy and my enemy, we're friends because we have a common enemy right now. Whoever is pushing all of this, we need to stop him. None of us want it to come to this, so... ends up pointing them toward, because it's like, right, they haven't really made the weapon yet, and it's apparently going down the uranium route, but there's only one person that can make it, and apparently it's a client of Mike's that can make it. He's like, oh, so that's why we're going to Budapest. And it's like, yep. So, and once again, because they're working alongside someone like Luca, Mike is saying, yeah, remember that line I brought up before? Yeah, we've definitely crossed it now, like specifically working with a man like Luca, so... it is definitely going to be really interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.